when Serie A was the greatest league on earth. This league had every elite player. There was a time when football had a gravitational center, a place where careers were tested, reputations were built, and sometimes destroyed. And if you were truly elite, if you wanted the world to treat you like a serious player, there was one league that mattered more than any other. Not England, not Spain, Italy. Because in the 1990s and early 2000s, Serie A wasn't just a top league. It was football's toughest ecosystem. And here's the part modern fans don't fully appreciate. Serie A didn't dominate because it was trendy. It dominated because it was structurally designed to crush you. The tactics were relentless. The defenders were educated, not just aggressive. The pressure was suffocating. And the talent pool across the entire league was absurd. This wasn't a league with one or two super teams. It was a league where mid-table clubs had squads that would qualify for the Champions League today. And once you understand how that happened, you'll understand why that era feels almost impossible to recreate in modern football. Let's start with the context, because this era didn't appear out of nowhere. Italy entered the 90s with serious football culture and serious club identities, regional pride, historic rivalries, stadiums that felt hostile, and a fan culture that could genuinely intimidate opponents. But the hidden engine was economics. Italian clubs had wealthy ownership structures early, industrial money, powerful local families, ambitious presidents who wanted to win now, and who were willing to spend aggressively to do it. And Italy benefited massively from timing. The 1990 World Cup in Italy helped keep global attention on the country, the stadiums, the culture, the atmosphere. Serie A became fashionable in the purest football sense. More importantly, Serie A was considered the most complete league. The thinking was simple. If you can win in Italy, where teams are tactically prepared, where defenses are brutal, where every match feels like a chess match, then you can win anywhere. That reputation became self-fulfilling. Because the best players started choosing Serie A, which made Serie A even better, which attracted even more elite players. People talk about Milan. People talk about Juve. People talk about Inter, but that's the surface-level version. The deeper truth is that the entire league was loaded. AC Milan had Maldini and Baresi, the gold standard of defensive intelligence. They had the Dutch trio, Gullit, Van Basten, Rijkaard, players that could dominate any era. And they weren't just talented. They were coached inside a system that turned talent into inevitability. Juventus were built like an institution. Not a vibe. Not a moment. An institution. Del Piero, Zidane, Davids, Inzaghi, and around them, structure, discipline, and European experience. Inter, in the late 90s, became a magnet for global superstardom. And yes, we need to say this out loud. Ronaldo Nazario played in Serie A at peak physical explosiveness. Not late career. Not nostalgia. Peak. And it wasn't easy for him. That's the point. Then you have Roma with Totti, an icon, but also a tactical weapon. Lazio with Nesta, Nedvedi, Verne, Crespo. Parma with Buffon, Cannavaro, Thuram, plus the kind of squad depth that looks illegal by today's standards. Even Fiorentina had Batistuta. And when Batistuta moved, he didn't go to England for branding, he went to Roma to win a title in Italy. Because that title meant something different. Here's a good way to understand it. In that era, the Premier League was exciting. La Liga was technical. But Serie A felt like the league where footballers became serious professionals. This is where people get it wrong. They hear Catenaccio and assume it means defensive, negative football. No. Italian defending at its best was not cowardice. It was craft. It was a culture of positional play, timing, spacing, reading the game, controlling zones, cutting angles, and punishing mistakes. Defenders weren't just hard, they were intelligent in a way that made attackers feel claustrophobic. A fullback didn't just mark you, he guided you into traps. A center back didn't just tackle, he waited until the moment you had no escape. And teams defended as units. That's why attackers who dominated other leagues sometimes looked ordinary in Italy. Because in Serie A, Space was not available. Space was something you had to steal. And it wasn't just the defenders. Midfielders tracked back like it was a religion. Tactical fouls were part of the language. And managers prepared for opponents with a level of detail that would be considered obsessive today. This is why that famous idea existed. Scoring 15 goals in Serie A meant more than scoring 25 elsewhere. Because the margin for error was microscopic. Here's what people forget. Serie A's golden era wasn't only about stopping teams. It was also a league of elite creators, players who could solve problems. Because if every match is a tactical cage fight, you need genius to break the lock. That's why the league also had Baggio, Zidane, Del Piero, Totti, Nedvedi, Seedorf, Pirlo, who later became the symbol of elegance under pressure. These players weren't collecting easy assists. They were inventing solutions in the most restricted spaces in European football. That's a different kind of greatness. One reason Serie A felt like the best league was simple. Italian clubs were constantly deep in Europe, and not in a nice run way, in a this is normal way. When Serie A teams reached later stages, it wasn't an upset. It was expected. And that matters psychologically, because leagues don't become the best only through talent. They become the best through validation, on the biggest stage. Serie A had that. It was the league where reputations were certified. If you were a top attacker and you performed in Italy, you gained legitimacy. If you were a defender and you mastered Serie A, you became a reference point. There's another layer people don't mention enough. The atmosphere in Italy could be oppressive. Derbies weren't just games. They were identity events. Milan versus Inter, Roma versus Lazio, Juventus versus the rest of Italy, depending on who you ask. The pressure wasn't just on the pitch. It was in the newspapers, the talk shows, the fan culture, the expectation that every weekend mattered. In some leagues, you can lose and move on. In peak Serie A, a bad game could feel like a national debate. That intensity sharpened players, or broke them. If you like this kind of football storytelling, deep context, real names, real reasons, hit like and subscribe. All right, now we get to the part that modern fans always ask. If Serie A was that good, what happened? The decline wasn't one event. It was a chain reaction. First, football economics shifted. The Premier League's TV money began to scale in a way Italy couldn't match. England packaged the league as a global product, fast, loud, modern, exportable. Spain marketed star power brilliantly, turning footballers into global icons inside a two-club gravitational system. Italy didn't modernize at the same speed. And then came structural issues that still matter today. Stadiums. Many clubs didn't own them. Many stadiums aged badly. Matchday revenue lagged behind. Commercial growth. Italy didn't build the same global sponsorship machine as England. Financial management. Clubs spent like the party would never end. Wages rose. Risk rose. Stability dropped. Then, a massive turning point that people underestimate. The Bosman ruling. It changed player movement in Europe. It changed contract power. It made it harder to lock in talent the way clubs used to. And while Italy was dealing with all of this, scandals hit. Calciopoli damaged trust, damaged branding, damaged momentum. Even if you separate the legal details from the cultural impact, the result was obvious. Serie A's image suffered. At the same time, the center of football money moved decisively. Top players followed the money, the marketing, the platform. And Serie A, once the final destination, started looking like a challenge with fewer rewards. That's when the league's identity shifted. From this is where the best are. To this is where you prove yourself, then leave. Now, here's where I'm going to be honest. Serie A today is not a dead league. Tactically, it's still one of the smartest leagues in Europe. Coaches still prepare, teams still adjust, matches still have layers, and in recent years you've seen Italian clubs become competitive again in Europe. But the gap isn't about football IQ. It's about infrastructure and scale. England has the biggest TV money machine. Spain has brand gravity with global stars. Italy has tradition, tactics, and massive club identities, but still needs modernization. However, and this is important, Serie A has something valuable right now: opportunity. Because football is cyclical. If Italian clubs continue improving stadiums, commercial strategy, and youth development pathways without repeating the financial chaos of the past, the league can absolutely climb again. Not necessarily to dominate over everyone's status like the 90s, but back into the conversation where top players don't treat it as a second choice. And that's the real battle. Not is Serie A good, but is Serie A destination again? When people romanticize 90s Serie A, it's not just nostalgia. It's that the ingredients were rare. A league-wide concentration of elite talent, managers who treated tactics like warfare, defenders with legendary intelligence, cultural pressure that made every match feel heavy, a global perception that Italy was football's hardest exam. Modern football has bigger money, but it rarely has that combination of difficulty, prestige, and density across an entire league. Today, talent is more concentrated into fewer clubs. Back then, you could watch a random Parma match and see Buffon, Cannavaro, Thuram. That was normal. That's why that era feels mythical. Because it almost was. So here's the final question. Was Serie A the greatest league in football history? Or was it simply the league that demanded the most from players? Mentally, tactically, emotionally. So it felt like the greatest.